Good evening, everybody. Tonight's topic is 4.16 dispersing agents. Our enabling objectives for this evening are describe the procedure to advance funds to a dispersing agent and state the procedures to return funds to the dispersing officer. So the enabling objectives are focusing on how do we advance funds to an agent and how does the agent return those funds to the dispersing office. Before we get into that, though, we're going to have to go through what an agent is. Our reference, of course, is the volume 5. And with this one, you will be using the old volume 5. The new volume 5 does not break down each one of the line items for the 1081. Our discussion points for this evening are the deputy dispersing officer, other dispersing agents, preparing the 1081 for an advance of funds and a turn-in, and then we'll roll into summary and review. All right, the deputy dispersing officer, we've talked about already, is going to be your assistant for the dispersing office. They will have almost all of the same capabilities as you as a dispersing officer. You as a dispersing officer will appoint them using a DD Form 577. This is the same form that is used to appoint you to the dispersing officer position. And then you as a dispersing officer are able to limit what your deputy can do. I think we talked in the past that my deputy was very limited in capabilities on what they could do because there were just a few things that I wanted them to manage for me. And so that did restrict my ability to take leave based on the schedule, et cetera. So be careful on what restrictions you implement. In addition to that, your deputy will be required to attend a dispersing school. It's typically going to be a PS that will have an NEC saying that they've gone through the school and that they know how to do the job. And it is enhancing to their career as it shows up on their advancement exams. Okay, so the deputy dispersing officer position is established by submitting the DD 577 to DFAS. It is a field examination group hit if you do not have a deputy assigned. And if you want to terminate your dispersing or your deputy dispersing officer, you'll use that same form 577 and you'll complete section 4. And section 4 states that they were terminated on this date for this reason. So typically that is rotation or something along those lines. It could also be for say they had malintent or you had suspicions about the trust that you could hold with them. Whenever you change over dispersing officers, so say Theo is my relief in theater and he checks in to be the dispersing officer, I will terminate the deputy and he will reappoint the deputy. So that is an appointment from that individual dispersing officer, not that position of the dispersing officer. All right, discussion point 2. We're going into dispersing agents. So this is an individual who is going to work in the dispersing office or outside of the dispersing office, but they don't have all the same capabilities that a deputy has. So they cannot sign U.S. Treasury checks and they cannot sign statements of accountability, which are the main portions of your job to make sure that those things are completed. But again, they can do things like keep cash and they can divvy out cash. So in this food chain, if you will, you have the dispersing officer, then you have the deputy dispersing officer, then you have dispersing agents. And that can be things like the cashier, and this cashier could be inside your dispersing office, but most probably it would be outside. And so this would be maybe somebody working with food service or retail ops. In addition to that, you could have a paying agent. So you might hear the term FUPA, which is a field ordering officer and paying agent. That refers to an individual that is appointed by a commanding officer, which is important to note because the deputy, who has a lot of responsibility and capability, is appointed by the dispersing officer. So this is a higher level up approval because the paying agent, like in a FUPA situation, they will have just essentially a bag of cash, and you need a lot of trust with this person to make sure that they are going to do things appropriately. All right. Now we're going to go and move into our enabling objectives. So we define a little bit of what an agent is and who that could be, what those positions are. But now we're going to talk about advancing funds to those agents. And so, Sans, I saw that you joined a little bit late. If you want to go into DoD Learn and open up DD 1081, that'll help you as we walk through this. All right. So the DD 1081 is filled out whenever the dispersing officer is advancing funds to an agent or an agent is returning funds to the dispersing officer. And so the funds that a dispersing office can advance to an agent are cash or pre-positioned treasury check. So that is essentially a check for a pre-filled out amount made payable to that agent. So if they run out of cash, they can deposit that with the deputy, and the deputy can give them cash back. And the whole point of that is to make sure that if you're out on leave, that the operation can still function. Important to note, the amount advanced shall not exceed an agent's cash holding authority. So a few lessons back, we talked about your authority to hold cash at personal risk. So the agent has a limit on how much they can hold as well. And so you can not advance them more. And throughout the day, if they exceed that threshold, at the end of the day, they need to make that deposit with the. All right, the agents need to store their funds in a safe. Whenever the 1081, the DD form 1081 is initiated, it's going to be initiated by the dispersing officer when it is an advance to the agent. If it is a turn in, the agent will initiate the form to deposit with the dispersing officer. All right, so now is when you need to go ahead and take a look at that form 1081. And if somebody can just give me a thumbs up whenever they're there.
I have it in front of me.
All right,
I do too.
perfect. At the top, you'll see a statement of agent officer account. And then you'll see dispersing officer's name, address. We're all familiar with that information. And then on the right, it's the agent's information. And so it doesn't matter if the agent is filling this out to turn in with the dispersing officer, or the dispersing officer is filling this out to advance funds to the agent. Dispersing officer is always on the left, and the agent is on the right. All right, this form is a little bit tricky. It is essentially a snapshot in time, and each one of the lines will be an aggregate from the day's work. So our line one is our balance forward. And so you're going to fill that out at, you'll see beginning balance in column C. So say you had received $2,000, or we'll just say $2,500, and your limit for your dispersing or your agent's threshold, if you will, they're only allowed to have $3,000. So if you give them $2,500 or they had it from the day before, you'll see it in that beginning balance. Now, when you go to line 2, it'll say US dollars. So if they had $2,500 in cash from the day before, that will go on balance forward. It will not go in US dollars because that US dollars will be a snapshot of your transactions throughout the day. So say you had received $500, you would put the increase by agent. You'll see increase received by agent. You'll put it in that column. If you had two transactions for $500 each where you received money, you would put $1,000 in line 2 US dollars increase received by agent column. Everybody tracking on that?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. All right. Line 3 is foreign currency. Typically, you're not going to have that, but you'll treat that the same way as US dollars. Line 4 is not used by the Navy, and line 5 and 6 are not used on advances. So that is not used from the dispersing officer to the agent. It will, though, be used from the agent to the dispersing officer. So if they had received collections from, say, food service, then they would have that there. Or if they had deposits that they needed to make with the dispersing officer, that would go there as well. All right. Line 7A is treasury checks. So if you are receiving or paying out treasury checks, they'll go here. And then we'll go down to, we're going to skip line 7 Bravo. Military payment orders are not a thing anymore, so we don't fill that one out. 7 Charlie is going to be where you put other checks. It can also be put on line 10 or 11, as long as you annotate that appropriately. So say somebody brought a personal check to that agent and they cashed it, then it would either go on 7 Charlie or line 10 or 11. Again, you just need to annotate that. All of those are acceptable. Line 8 is not used on an advance. And line 9 is incorrect vouchers returned. So if your dispersing officer said, hey, you did this voucher incorrectly, and they returned it to the agent, that will go on that line there. Line 10 and 11, like I mentioned before, would be other, so it could be for personal check. And then line 12 is the total funds in agent's hands. So that is a sum of lines 2 through 11. All right, and now we're going to briefly go over the turn-in one, and then I'm going to kind of walk you through what this would look like in real life. All right, so 1081 is prepared for turn-in at least weekly, or when agent will be absent in excess of 5 days. All right, so line 1, we talked about this. You'll have your beginning balance, and then your one echo. So your line 1, column echo, will be your ending balance. So you're primarily concerned with your 12 echo. So don't focus too much on one echo. You'll have your beginning balance and then your one echo You can fill it in, but it only really matters that your 12 echo matches. Line 2, you're going to have the amount of U.S. currency returned. Line 3, same with foreign currency. Line 5, collections. So, like I said, this would be a collection from food service, retail ops. Line 6 is deposits, and then you'll have the deposit ticket. Line 8 will be paid vouchers. So, if you had one of those scenarios where it said somebody was doing short patrol and you needed to pay out, that would go there. And then line 12 will be your total funds in hands of agent. So going back, just make sure that you have this form in front of you. We're going to fill out the header, the dispersing officer's name and the agent officer's name. Then say for line 1 in column Charlie, beginning balance, the agent started the day with $2,500 in their accountability. Then they made collections from food service and retail ops in the amount of $1,000 and $500. That would go on line 5 collection, which is a little bit confusing, but it will go in collection. And so in there, their line 12, Charlie, after those two transactions that they had, would go from a beginning balance of 2,500 to a total funds in hand of agent of $4,000. Now, in the scenario, just say that the agent has a threshold of around, we'll say it's $3,000. They cannot exceed that. And they also paid a voucher out that day, so that would be a line 8 transaction of $200. So again, we had the balance forward of 2,500. We had collections of $1,000 plus another $500, so $1,500. And so that would show up in line 5 collections, column Bravo, increase received by agent. And then we had a paid voucher of $200. And that paid voucher of $200 would go in line 8, column Delta. And then our line 12 would be an aggregate of the amounts in columns B and C. So this is where a lot of people get confused because the scenario I just walked through, there was an increase in accountability from collections as well as a decrease from paid vouchers. But our line 12 does not reflect, our 12 Charlie does not reflect anything done in column Delta or Echo. So after that, we have total funds in hands of agent. That'll be $4,000 in our line 12. And we said in line 8, paid vouchers, we had $200. So that would take our new total down to $3,800. But we set our threshold for how much the agent could have was $3,000. So we would have to do a deposit of US dollars to the dispersing officer in the amount of $800. Are y'all tracking or did I lose you?
I think I'm mostly tracking.
Okay. All right. So if you look down past the lines 1 through 12 on the 1081, you will see 4 blocks. And the top 2 say on advance. So those will be X'd out when the dispersing officer is filling this out to the agent. The bottom ones will be on return. So that is when the agent is filling this out and depositing with the dispersing officer. All right, so a few things to remember that the 1081 is a snapshot. It is not a working document. So each one of the transactions of the agent will not be entered on this as they're going throughout their day. This is either a, again, a snapshot from when the dispersing officer is advancing funds or when the agent is returning funds. So whenever you're going through this, don't get confused and say, well, this would happen if it was a living document, because it's not. It's like a balance sheet. It is a quick snapshot in time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Awesome. So what questions do you all have so far? All right. Who initiates a DD form 1081 on an advance? So an advance is from the dispersing officer to the agent.
Disbursing officer.
Absolutely. Who initiates the DD form 1081 on a turn in, which is from the agent to the dispersing officer?
Would that be the agent?
Absolutely. How often should the dispersing officer balance his or her deputy, agent, or cashier?
At least weekly,
Yes.
or if they're going to be absent for 5 days or
Perfect.
more.
Who appoints an individual to the position of deputy dispersing officer?
I believe that's the dispersing officer.
Absolutely. A few other questions. If you have a paying agent, who appoints them?
Is that also the dispersing officer?
So it is a recommendation from the dispersing officer to the commanding officer, but that
Ah,
appointment is done by the commanding officer.
by the CO. Okay.
All right. So the DD form 1081 can be a little bit confusing. But remember, all of your increases in accountability are done in columns Bravo and Charlie. Your decreases are Delta and Echo. So your Charlie and Echo are the aggregate, your total columns for your Bravo and Delta. So again, our balance forward is our previous days, line 12 from the 1081. Any additions that we've had in that day's business, whenever we're doing the turn in, if it is an increase in accountability, it will go in column Bravo. If it is a decrease in accountability, it will go in column Delta. Your Charlie and Echo, line 12, is the sum of all of your accountability for that day from your addition of accountability or your decrease in accountability for your Charlie and Echo, respectively.
So I have a quick question for you, answering your question. Is there any way we can have maybe uh, like a simulation or like a problem to just use to fill out this form 1081 so we can get accustomed to how it's filled out. And if you had any questions, we can ask you and for feedback.
Yeah. Do you want to go through a couple problems right now?
Maybe as a homework, unless there's still some time to do that, but as a homework, we can work on that and then maybe circle back with
Okay.
questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the red book, there is a homework opportunity there. And it is on page 77 and 79. There are two separate sets. And then next time, whenever we start the lesson, we can go over those because I feel like the 1081 is an important form to understand, especially since it can be so confusing.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
No problem. So tonight's lesson was a very quick one. But again, I highly encourage you to do those homework pages. And then on the forums, you're not going to have really anything on the 1081. So focus on that homework for the additional exercise there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.